In the beginning, we were little more than a clump of cells, bound to the fate of our parents' genetics and the random chance of life in the universe. When we were born, Bridget came and blessed us with the 9 blessings, and our life began. Locked into the intricate web of fate, spun by every person that interacted with us, teaching us who we were, who we came from, and what it was we were supposed to be and become. But over time, our agency grew, and a desire was born in us to weave our own fate. Today, in our continuing Druidcraft 101 series, we're going to be talking about the 2 fates of Donna and Wyrd, the fate that you are born with and the fate that you make for yourself. So join us as we discuss fate, walking together down creation's paths. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I am a Christopagan Druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christopagan Druid and sous chef to the Doctor.
Today, we're going to be talking about the 2 fates, the one that we are born with and the one that we get to make for ourselves, and how we can use, defy, and weave these fates for ourselves. But before we get into all that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever the app is you're listening to us on. We do original Christopagan and Druid content 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And you don't want to miss a thing, especially as we're going through our Druidcraft 101 and helping people start their Druidcraft practice. Even if you're a practitioner already, learning a common language so that we can talk with each other and help each other grow in the arts. All right, let's just get into it. Can you tell I'm really pumped to get into this one today?
Favorite topic of yours?
It really is, because I think this is where people get really lost in the idea of fate. And I do want to point out for anybody who's like, those don't sound like they're words from the same language. They're not. We're talking about 2 different ideas of fate that exist actually in both of the cultures that we're drawing words for. The difficulty is that in both of these languages, you would use the word either Donna in Irish or Wyrd in Anglo-Saxon to mean the same thing for both. The reason I'm separating them in the way that I am is because Dana can also be a word that means craft or practice or work. It means the arts. And so that plays into why I picked the words in the way that I did, just so that it's easier to differentiate. So when I'm saying fate, I can say either Donna or Wyrd, and you know exactly which one I'm talking about without having to do a big long spiel.
Because words have meaning, folks. And
They do.
it's not just the general rant that I like to go on about words having meaning, but it's also words are how we conceptualize thought forms and ideas, are how we formalize thought forms and ideas, how we interact and relate with, and it's our relationship with those through words. Part of having good relationship with our language and with our communication skills and with our understandings is having a good vocabulary to cover those specific thought forms. Because I could say the word fate to 10 people and 10 people could think of it in 10 different ways. That's not good. That doesn't help anybody. And we're going to get into covering more of the different types. Having that language allows us to have better understandings of things. For instance, some of the diversity in both sexuality and identity awareness came about through having better language so that we could communicate those feelings and those thought forms to each other and realize, oh yeah, there is a much greater diversity here. So that's my little rant on words have meaning.
I go on a similar rant all the time.
I step down off my soapbox now.
We, as practitioners of Druidcraft, are the Aeshdana. If you're trying to look that up, that's Aesdana, 2 words, Aeshdana, which means the people of the arts, people of the craft. We're the talented ones. You could potentially read that as the fated ones, depending on your ego, whether or not you read it that way or not. It's usually the people of the craft, or the crafty people, or the talent. The Donna that we're talking about here is the fate that we are born with. It is all the skills, the talents, the natural proclivities. Some of us are natural energy workers. Some of us are natural uh, pattern seers. Some of us are artists, poets. Some of us are writers. Some of us are cooks. Some of us are drawn to the more apothecary arts and doing more potion making. Some of us are drawn to crystal scrying. We're all drawn to different things. And that is our Donna. That is what we are born with. And it comes down to us both genetically from our ancestors that maybe we don't have eyes that let us see all of the colors to get into certain types of painting. Maybe we don't have the natural predilection for aura reading or any of those things. It's what we are born with. It's our starting plate. And it's where our strengths usually lie.
As I like to look at it, it's those things that drive us every day, and it influences and drives all of our decisions. For instance, if you have a natural
Inclination.
towards math, you're going to find yourself involved in more areas that involve math, that utilize that. Whereas somebody who has the opposite of that, you could say they're fated not to be a statistician because they're naturally not good at it. So they're going to not go towards that particular area. And their drives, their choices, their desires, what makes them happy is going to be away from that area. And it
And
doesn't
what
mean they're not going to. It just means they're going, odds are in favor. They're not going to end up down those various paths.
And these are the things that we are, like you were saying, naturally inclined to or naturally skilled in. I'm a storyteller. It and I can see this in my blood. Like my dad is a natural storyteller. My both of my grandfathers were natural storytellers. My great grandfather was a Poppy was one of the best storytellers I've ever heard tell stories. Like I can see this lineage of storytelling that has been passed down to me. And whether that is from the culture that I grew up in, from my genetic makeup, I think people put sometimes too much emphasis on this nature nurture thing. I was going to be a storyteller because I was born into this family, regardless of any of that, whether it's in my genes or it's from having sat with my great grandfather and my grandfathers and my father hearing these stories, sitting around with all the cousins telling stories at the family reunions. Like this is such an ingrained part of our family culture that yes, it may be in our genes or it just may be our family culture. And trying to weed between those it's unhelpful. So when you're trying to figure out what your Dana is, because I think a lot of people confuse Dana for purpose. Your fate is not your purpose. Your fate is your starting skills, your starting talent, what you can work better at. It might be easier to think of your Dana as like those tests that you take in school that are like, here are some professions that might be good for you. Like that's what Dana is really looking at. So do you like to draw? Then maybe you should be looking towards doing sigil magic or other kinds of paint scrying or automatic painting or something like that as a way to focus in. Do you like writing? Do you like telling stories? Do you like sitting and meditating? Is that something that comes naturally to you? And that's what you're really digging into here to figure out that fate that you were born into. What are the tools that you naturally have? Now, here's the important thing here. I said that some people are born natural energy workers. Many of the members of my family are natural energy workers. It's just how we are born. That switch is turned on in us. And we have this tradition that I know I got from my great grandmother, where who would sit around and we would talk about these things quite a bit in her cabin. And that's something that has really come down me. But if you don't have that naturally in your skill set, this is where the other kind of fate, Wyrd, comes in. If you're drawn to it or you want to draw it in you yourself, you can through work, discipline, and application. Like you have to put in the effort, put in the work to get yourself to where you want to go. There are a lot of ways to learn how to connect to those more subtle energies. And that's not the topic of today's episode. But if you want us to do one about that, let us know in the comments. That is something that you can strive for. It's not, I don't have that ability, so I will never have that ability. You may not have it to the degree of somebody who was just born with it. I love to draw. I love to draw. I love to paint. One of my best friends growing up was like a human photocopy. Like you would say, "Hey, draw this," and you'd watch his hand just swipe over the sheet of paper with some charcoal or a pencil, and the picture would be there. He would just shade it in, just as if, like I said, like a printer or something, just back and forth, and it would just be there. And it was this natural inborn talent. I mean, we were kids, right? We were both probably about 11 years old when we met, and he already had that just in him, that he could recreate anything. He could make anything that he had seen, he could just draw it. And it looked so good and it looked so real. And he could even pull things out of his imagination. Or if you described an imaginary thing to him, he could draw it. I've never had that. That's not me. That's not the person that I am. Right. But I love to draw. So through the working of Wyrd, I have pulled that into myself and I have learned ways to draw. I have learned ways to make art. I have learned ways to paint. I have learned ways to do that. And I think this is going to be an episode where people are going to be very disappointed because I'm hoping you're not expecting me to go, and here's the incantation that you cast to make this happen. Because yes, you could do a spell to help draw the energies to yourself. You can do a spell to help you out. You can summon spirits to help you out with this. Goodness sakes, in the Middle Ages, there was a whole Sartora tradition where people were especially in Parisian universities, were summoning the Sartora, the prince of the Torah, this angel that would supposedly teach them in their sleep. Like it was the first like learn while you're sleeping technique. Like it was this ritual that you would perform before you'd sleep, and they believed that this angel would come and tutor their sleep so that they didn't have to actually do their studies. Interesting. Don't know how well any of that works, but I mean, interesting.
Well, I mean, it goes back to, as we like to say, without works, there isn't anything there for the energy to stick to. It's just going to flow in and flow right back out because the energy will keep flowing. Like when people are wanting stimulants to stay awake, like caffeine or something, caffeine's great and all, but it's just a cardiac stimulant. It doesn't matter how hard you get your heart pumping. If you're not pulling in the oxygen and if your system isn't distributing the oxygen to the cells and the cells aren't processing it well, if that other work isn't being done, there's no amount of caffeine that's going to matter. You're going to stay tired. That's where the work has to be as well. That effort has to be put in along with that. It's the same thing with anybody born with a natural aptitude. It's wonderful to have that natural aptitude, but if you don't put the work and effort in, it's only going to go so far. It's,
And it has the
you
chance
know,
to be more wild and chaotic.
oh, yeah, entirely, uh,
So
entirely wild and chaotic.
when you're doing the practice, you may be asking yourselves then, why, as a practitioner, would I want to focus on fate? If fate is something that I can't just magically change, why should I worry about this? The answer to that is very simple. We've talked about learning to see and connect to the subtle energies of life that give purpose and cause to our lives. We've talked about seeing these subtle energies that manipulate and control our actions, our activities, and yes, control our fate. And yes, control our fate. Because if we're not paying attention to those, then they are just going to be controlling us outside of our own powers to manipulate or see. So you have to start looking at your fate so that you know where you need to put the work and the effort in. I was born with a very great temper, for example. I definitely got this from my grandfather, my grandpa Dorset, who was infamous for his temper. I inherited this temper. My father also has it. And this is one of those things where I could either say, this is my fate. I am going to be living on a just really thin spring that will pop, and I will go off and yell and shout. And sometimes especially when I was younger, throw hands at people, or I can learn techniques to control that aspect and rein it in. And I chose the latter. And it's not that my temper has gone away, it has diminished because, like most energies in our lives, if we don't feed them, they do tend to wither. And so I still have moments where my heart starts pounding, my face starts reddening, and you can see my fists start to ball up. But I know now how to defy that aspect of my fate. I know what aspects to feed and what aspects to deprive of that light and oxygen so that they don't get to be empowered and powerful within me. And this is a lifelong process. This isn't something that you're going to do in one sitting. This is not something you're going to do as a year project. This is a lifelong project of realizing, oh, that's something that I got from this member, this line of my family. That's something that, oh, yeah, I have always done that, haven't I? Because you're always going to be learning new things about yourself. It's one of the great mysteries and wonders and glories of life that you constantly learn new things about yourself. And so, as you're going through that process and you're learning and you're getting better at seeing all of these different parts of your fate that you were born with, your Donna, you start channeling that and weaving that in the directions that you want. Yes, I am very prone to anger, right? But you have seen on this podcast how that gets channeled. I'm allowed to have righteous indignation and get up on my soapbox and speak the truth when the truth needs to be said. And I know when I can and cannot say it and I do my best to actually moderate myself there. I'm not great at that. I'm still working on that part. But you can see on episodes that we've done of this podcast where we've hit a point and that righteous fury just kind of wells up and like, no, this has to be said. Sorry, we're going off script. Like, how often do you hear me say it's like, well, we had a plan, but we're going off script today because it has, right?
This
That's
is
what,
one of the I'm sorry.
but that's working with your Donna, learning how to channel it and to focus it and weave it through the arts of the weird.
And this is one of those things that often gets missed, especially when people are talking about fate and the imagery of the web, right? Like I love the imagery of the web and weaving stuff together because that is very appropriate. But in all of this, you are working with these different energies to get a deeper understanding on how to work better with those energies. Really, I would recommend people study fluid dynamics and water dynamics because understanding how water flows and how flows um, can really help get a deeper understanding on like what Charlie was talking about with sublimating those uh unhelpful energies that you know you may
I
be
actually
born
really
with
like
this, so you may be fated with that. You can sublimate it, you can redirect it and flow it into a way that is productive that leads towards the goals that you're shooting for.
the Buddhist term of unskillful means.
Yes,
I,
that's an
I
excellent term.
I love that term of these are the unskillful means, and what we want to do is only engage in the skillful means.
Yes.
Now, I don't want to mislead anyone here and say that there aren't any magical practices that you can and should be doing. This is actually where your divination practice comes in. Learning to trust your intuition, learning to train your intuition so that it is picking up on these subtle energies, whether it's from your fate or others, so that you can see what is coming from their Dana. That's just who they are. And it's something that they have to work on when it's an aspect of their weird that this is something they're trying to project into the world and manifest and make it real. Some of that does come through this very strong intuition training, but you can also do other forms of divination as well. I love to do pendulum scrying. I love to do mirror scrying. I love to do cloud gazing. Cloud gazing and cloud scrying are two of my favorite ways to connect to these energies and to kind of uh, get into that intuitive space where I can see the fates that are weaving around those flows of energy, as Brian was referring to them, those currents of energy and how they're actually working and influencing people's lives, and be able to bring that wisdom back to myself and to help others that I'm working with.
Because that is one of those things when you're helping somebody else, if you're helping to bring some healing to somebody else, understanding this difference in fate, the Donna and the weird, and being able to see that in another person, sometimes they could be unhealthy just because they're trying to force weave in things into their life that are in contradiction with their Donna that maybe shouldn't be. You know what I'm saying? Where you run into that person that has brought great suffering just because they're trying to fight against some of the very things that make them themselves.
And those people who think that they have been trapped by their Dana, the fate that they were born with, but were actually trapped in the weird of others. I think of that character Babbage in that tragic novel, who at the very end says, I've never done a thing I have wanted to in my entire life."
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And that is a character I don't want to be. That's the character I never want to be. That is something I never want to say about myself. And so learning the tools of divination that you like to use, that could be tarot cards, that could be uh oracle cards, that could be, I do have kind of a fey bag with various things that I have picked up as gifts from the other crowd over the years that have very particular resonances and meanings to me that I will cast from time to time. And it's not an art I can teach anyone, because it's not, oh, this piece of quartz means this because quartz means this. It's okay, let me tell you the story of how I found this piece of quartz and how it came into my life and why I have it and why it means this when it's near that penny. That's a whole Faycraft thing where you're looking for these gifts and you're starting to see these kind of little bits that you can collect and use for this kind of oracular practice. But you will eventually find what some form of divination that works for you and that you connect with. I haven't mentioned my other favorite, which is water scrying. I especially love doing water scrying at natural bodies of water, whether it's a river, a stream, a lake. I've never done water scrying on the ocean. I think that could be really interesting. Uh, but
Idle
all
scrying.
all of these are intuitive art. And that is the other big thing to keep in mind when we're talking about fate. Fate is never certain. Fate is a that is rushing in a certain direction. That does not mean it cannot be diverted. With enough foreknowledge and enough effort, even if you don't have enough foreknowledge, with enough effort, you can put up what breaks to move the water away. It may be a slow moving approach like lava. It could be a quick moving inundation like a flash flood. Learning to see those things, learning to see what is on the horizon for you, and be able to make those preparations that you can to divert and move that water around you. You may not be able to use it. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you can figure out, oh, okay, something's going to be happening this way. And at this time, I need to slap down a water wheel so I can collect that energy and do a thing, right? Like I think a lot of us did with the last solar eclipse. Many of us do every month with the various phases of the moon. Some of us do every year with the cycles of the sun. Some do with meteor showers. You can do this with any of these energies that are flowing through. They can be collected, they can be purified through practices similar to Tonglen, the Buddhist practice of Tonglen, where you can purify and cleanse the energy and use it for better, skillful means. But you have to learn how to see it and how to name it properly before you can do any of that more advanced manipulation, other work to it or with it. And that takes learning to trust your intuition, which is why we always recommend having a journal and keeping a journal. Because when you have an intuition and you write it down, you can then go back and check it. Did it happen the way I felt things were going to happen? Did I understand this properly? Well, how did I misunderstand? How did I misinterpret? What parts of that instinct were right? What part of that instinct was wrong? Dot, dot, dot. You can start parsing that out for yourself, right? And that's one of the best ways to train your intuition, is to really keep detailed notes when you have those intuitive moments, so that you don't gaslight yourself into thinking, well, I definitely saw this coming. And it's like, no, you said there was going to be a dark cloud could come over people on the 5th. And that's not the same as predicting a hurricane hitting this specific location at this specific time. Dark cloud and hurricane are not, like, you may have had an inkling of a storm coming, maybe, but no, you didn't predict a hurricane. Do you get what I'm saying? Your intuition wasn't good enough to actually know what was needed, because a dark cloud being overhead could be symbolic. It could mean that a depression is going to come in, a funk is going to come in, a bunch of rumors are coming in, right? It's not specific enough of an intuition to be actionable. And all of our magic, and I can't say this enough, all of our magic and all of our craft has to be actionable and falsifiable. You need to be able to sit back and know what parts of your craft are working, what parts of your craft need to be fixed, and what parts of your craft you need to do more work on. And if you're not keeping your notes to keep yourself on track for that, especially with this fate stuff. I mean, so many people that are like, I'm an aura reader, I'm an empath, I'm psychic. I hate to tell you, I'm a little bit psychic, who have done absolutely nothing to discipline those talents that they may have in fact been born with. And so they're scattered all over the place and they're telling you things that are radically untrue. And when you tell them that they're untrue, they just look at you and go, oh, it's okay. You'll understand one day. Unlike a friend of mine whose name I almost said, but I haven't got her permission to say her name on the podcast, so I'm not going to say it. But I'm like a friend of mine who has put in all of that work. And if she ever contacts me and says, Charlie, I've had a feeling, I've had a premonition, I've had a vision, this is going to happen, I write it down and start making plans. Because in all the time that I've known her, she has never been wrong, not once, and not like vaguely right. Like something will happen to you in 2004. No, no, no. Like she has been very specific, very clear, and hauntingly accurate because she's put in that work to train her intuition and to understand it in a way that it is actionable.
For example, if she saw every time a dark cloud meant a hurricane at this point in time, she then realized, oh, dark cloud equals hurricane for me. And so then when she sees another dark cloud, she goes, instead of writing down dark cloud in the journal, she goes hurricane and sees hurricane and goes, okay, because that may be a lot of that's your personal interpretation engine in your own head. And learning your personal correspondences, that's where that becomes so important.
A lot of her intuitions come from feeling certain animals'
Mhm.
presences. And when she realized exactly which animal represented me and how it related to the others, like she doesn't come to me and tell me this like story about the animals playing in the woods. She tells me the interpretation of it. Because again, that's
Yeah.
actionable for me. And
Yeah.
that's really the work that we're working here. So learn to train your intuition. Don't be hard on yourself, but be clear that you are trying to do this. Don't let yourself off and be like, well, I was close. I said something weird was going to happen and that car almost cut you off in traffic. I'm sorry, a car cutting somebody off in traffic is not weird. Don't try to justify. No, you may have just been wrong. You may have misinterpreted. It's fine. That happens, especially in those when you're learning. And it will continue to happen as you continue in the practice because you will encounter new experiences that you don't have those kind of hammered out understandings of what they mean. And that's how you work with fate. I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that you've gotten something out of this. And I hope that you can take this into your practice and start really learning how to see what you were born with and what those energies are that need to be manipulated to move forward. And I know you're thinking, but Charlie, you haven't told us how to actually put up those brakes. You haven't told us how to manipulate those powers that we see, those currents we see. That's what magic is. But if you're not doing this work here, learning to see those currents, what currents are present, what currents are there that you can tap into, what needs to be diverted, if you're not doing that early work, your magic will suffer on the other side because there are a lot of people that treat magic like a wishing well. I'm going to put my spell on the coin and I'm going to throw it out into the universe and it's, going to do everything that I want it to do. You can't get results like that. But learning to align yourself with the powers that are already existing around you and learning how to steer them and drive them, one, it's going to get you quicker results, but it's also going to give you more powerful results because you're not going to have to create a wave out of nothing. You will be able to use what is already there. And, it's really in some ways, and I'm saying this with all the sarcasm in my heart, it is the real green magic. It's recycling all of these unnecessary energy in the area and helping them to go to better uses and not letting them just go to waste. That was a bad joke, but I stand by it. All right. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. If you have, don't forget to to give us a like or whatever you could do on whatever platform you're on. I would love to know your experiences with fate. What's your favorite kinds of divination? How are you connecting to all this? You let us know down in the comments. If you're listening to us on YouTube or Spotify, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say you can leave a comment, they will not notify us and we will not know. You can leave a comment there anyway because engagement is magic. And then head over to creationspaths.com, click on chat, and you can leave a comment there. And we will be able to see it and we will be able to get back to you. I wasn't really joking when I said, let's start a coven when we started this project. And I'd really like to see us start developing some community spaces and start talking to each other more. So we already have the community space built up on creationspass.com in the chat, which you can download the Substack app and just have on your phone, and we can start having these conversations more regularly. We keep refreshing the YouTube page to see when we get their new community features that are rolling out, so we can try it over there. We want to be where people are. Those are the community places that we have right now. If while you're over at Creations Pass, you have a few dollars you can pass our way, we offer annual and monthly memberships. And all that really does is help us keep food on the table, keep the lights on, and really keep us doing this work, because we would love for this to be our full-time job and not have to take side work and other work, so that we can focus more on making sure that this community is growing and that people are learning and we are doing the work that we want to be doing of making this world better. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I am CE Dorset on both, and that goes to support everything that I do, including my fiction, music, and other projects. And you can also do one-time donations over at Ko-fi as well. If you just don't have any money right now, I completely understand that. If we've made anything that has helped you or that you think could help others, please share it. That makes all the difference in the world. Alrighty. As we've been going out, I think we have to go to one of the others who has a very soft spot in my heart. Oh, Morrigan, spectral queen, ruler of fate and the destinies of people and nations. Help us to see and to read the currents of fate and to learn to turn and twist them so that they may come to the outcomes that we desire. Amen.
Amen.